Is this some kind of joke? Sergeant Cad's voice cut through the dry desert air, sharp and arrogant. He gestured with a gloved hand, his brand-new optics-laden rifle held loosely, a symbol of modern warfare. His target was not a distant silhouette, but the old man standing quietly at the adjacent firing lane. Rangemaster said, "We had a guest." Didn't say it was someone who wandered off from the retirement home. The old man, Samuel Finch, didn't flinch. He simply continued to unwrap a long, heavy object from an oilcloth cloth. His movements were slow, deliberate, each fold of the fabric treated with a reverence that seemed out of place on this high-tech military range. The young rangers around Cade snickered, their confidence as polished as their boots. They were the elite, the tip of the spear, and this place with its digital targeting systems and ballistic computers was their temple. "Hey Pops, you hear me?" Cade pressed, taking a step closer. He was a bowl of a man barely 25, with a neck as thick as a tree trunk and eyes that had only ever seen the world through a scope. "This is a live fire range for active duty personnel, not a museum." Samuel finally finished his task, laying the object on the shooting bench. It was a revolver, a massive long-barreled Magnum with a bluing worn to a soft gray in a 100 places. The wooden grip was dark with age and oil, smoothed down by a hand that had held it for a lifetime. A clunky, oversized scope was mounted on top, looking like a crude afterthought. Scratches and nicks marred its surface, each one a silent testament to a story the young men couldn't begin to comprehend. One of the rangers, a private named Chun, leaned in. "Sarge, look at that thing. It looks like it's about to fall apart." Cade laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Fall apart? That thing looks like it was put together from spare parts in a junkyard. What is that? A 44? You planning on hunting some dirty, hairy fantasies? Old-timer?" Samuel finally looked up. His eyes were the only part of him that didn't seem old. They were a pale, clear blue, steady and deep, and they held Cad's gaze without a flicker of anger or fear. "It served me well," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, like stones shifting at the bottom of a river. "Served you well? When? The Spanish-American War?" Cade scoffed, turning to his men for approval. They obliged with more laughter. "Look, I don't know who you are or who you know to get you on my range, but you and your relic are a safety hazard. Now pack it up before you hurt yourself." Samuel ignored him, his attention back on the revolver. His hands, gnarled with age and mapped with the fine lines of 1,000 repairs, moved with an impossible gentleness. He pulled a single long cartridge from a worn leather pouch. It was handmade, the brass casing polished, but clearly reloaded many times. He slid it into one of the chambers of the cylinder with a soft click. This quiet act of defiance seemed to enrage Cade. He stepped forward, his shadow falling over the old man and his gun. "Are you deaf? I gave you an order, old man. This is a restricted military facility. We're training for real-world scenarios here, not playing cowboys." He pointed toward the far end of the range where digital targets shimmered in the heat haze. "We're engaging targets at 800 meters. Your little pop gun there couldn't hit the mountain behind them, let alone the target." Samuel's eyes drifted toward the distant targets a mile away across the shimmering sand. He squinted slightly, his focus sharpening. He saw things the younger men didn't. He saw the subtle dance of the heat mirage, felt the whisper of a crosswind on his cheek, a variable the range's advanced computers would account for, but which he felt in his bones. "It's been a long time," Samuel murmured almost to himself. The touch of the worn wooden grip was a key, unlocking a door in his mind. The desert sun on his neck suddenly felt like the humid jungle heat of Southeast Asia. The smell of modern gunpowder was replaced by the acrid scent of cordite and wet earth. He was 24 again, lying in thick mud, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. 2 of his men were down, pinned by a sniper nested in a crumbling stone tower an impossible distance away. They couldn't get a fix on him. The sniper was a ghost firing through a tiny murder hole. And every time someone moved, another shot would ring out, terrifyingly accurate. They were out of options. Their own sniper was one of the men bleeding out in the mud. All they had was him and the gun. His commander's voice, a desperate whisper over the radio. "Can you do it? Can you make that shot?" He had looked at the Magnum, the same one now lying on the bench. It wasn't standard issue. It was a custom piece, a prototype built for a purpose no one ever believed would be necessary. He had cradled it, felt the weight, and whispered back, "I can try." "Try what, Grandpa?" "Trying to remember your own name." Cad's voice snapped him back to the present. The sergeant's patience had evaporated. "That's it. I'm calling the base commander. You're done here." Samuel's hand rested on the Magnum's grip. "They were given to me," he said, his voice quiet but firm, answering a question Cade hadn't asked. "The scratches." He traced a deep gouge near the trigger guard. "That one was from a rock fall in the mountains. Saved my life. This one." He touched a small nick on the barrel with shrapnel. Cade just rolled his eyes. "Save the war stories. We've all got him." He pulled out his radio, but before he could press the button, Samuel spoke again. "What's the furthest target you have?" The question was so unexpected, so calm that it stopped Cade in his tracks. He stared at the old man, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "What? The target? The furthest one?" Cade smirked, deciding to play along with the old man's delusion. He pointed to a small display screen showing the range layout. "See that red flag way out there? The one you can't even see without a 20 power scope." He tapped the screen. "That's the 1,800-meter marker. It's for the .50 cal rifles, boys. A handgun round would start falling out of the sky before it got halfway there. The bullet drop would be over 300 feet. It's physically impossible." Samuel nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on that distant, invisible point. "Set up a standard silhouette target there." The Rangers stared, mouth agape. Even the Private Chun, who had felt a sliver of sympathy for the old man, thought he'd finally lost his mind. This wasn't confidence. It was a slit-throated laugh. "You want to shoot at 1,800 meters?" With that, he slapped his thigh, tears of mirth in his eyes. "Okay, you know what? Fine, I'll play your little game. You want to embarrass yourself? Be my guest. It'll be the highlight of my week." He barked at the range technician in the control tower over his comms. "Hey Tech, put a man-sized silhouette up on the 1,800-meter mark." "Yeah, you heard me. For the old-timer here, he thinks his six-shooter can reach it." A crackle of static and a confused voice replied. Sergeant, that's not possible with a handgun." "Just do it," Cade commanded. A few moments later, the large screen showing the downrange cameras flickered, then zoomed in on a tiny white shape being raised far in the distance. It was almost a pixel. The other Rangers gathered around, their mockery now mixed with a morbid curiosity. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Private Chun found himself holding his breath, a strange feeling of anticipation and dread washing over him. There was something in the old man's stillness, in the profound calm he projected that defied logic. Samuel paid them no mind. The world had shrunk to him, the bench, the gun, and a point in space over a mile away. He picked up the Magnum. It settled into his hand, not like a tool, but like an extension of his own arm. He checked the custom scope, making a minute adjustment to a dial that wasn't for windage or elevation. It was something else, something no one else understood. He stood, not taking a prone or brace position as the Rangers would have. He just stood there, feet planted shoulder-width apart, a posture of perfect, relaxed balance. He raised the heavy revolver with both hands, the long barrel pointing skyward at what seemed like an absurd angle. Cade snorted. "What are you doing, shooting at the moon?" You have to aim at the target, Pops. Samuel didn't answer. He was listening to the wind, feeling the subtle rotation of the earth, calculating variables with a computer made of instinct and a lifetime of experience. His eyes closed for a second. The jungle tower, the rain, the impossible shot. He hadn't aimed at the sniper. He'd aimed at a spot in the sky above him. He'd calculated the wind, the humidity, the spin of the earth itself. He'd factored in the unique, heavy grain of his hand-loaded bullet. He had let the universe do the work, guiding the round on its long parabolic journey. He remembered the feeling of the trigger breaking clean and crisp, the thunderous roar of the Magnum, the agonizing 5-second wait, and then the distant puff of stone dust from the tower, followed by a profound silence. He had saved them. He opened his eyes. They were focused, sharp, and achingly clear. He took a slow, deep breath, held it, and then let half of it out. His finger tightened on the trigger. The universe went silent. There was only the pressure, the brake, and the waiting. The Magnum roared. It wasn't the sharp crack of the Rangers' rifles. It was a deep, thunderous boom that seemed to shake the very ground. The recoil kicked the barrel up violently, but Samuel's body absorbed it with a practiced grace that belied his age. The massive gun settled back down as if it were a toy. The shell casing ejected with a soft metallic ping, landing on the dusty concrete. Then silence. Everyone's eyes shot to the massive monitor. It showed the distant target, a tiny white speck against the brown earth. Nothing happened. 1 second, 2, the Rangers started to snicker again. Cade crossed his arms, a smug "I told you so" look on his face. "See?" he began. "Told you it was." A tiny dark speck suddenly appeared in the dead center of the silhouette's head on the screen. The snickering died in their throats. A collective gasp rippled through the group of elite soldiers. They stared unblinking at the screen. The camera zoomed in, the digital image sharpening until there was no room for doubt. It was a perfect dead-center shot. A hole punched cleanly through the metal right between the eyes from 1,800 meters, with a revolver standing. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the wind whistling softly across the range, and the faint, tiny echo of the impact, finally reaching them from across the desert. The young Rangers looked from the screen to the old man, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, terrifying respect. They weren't just looking at an old man anymore. They were looking at a legend. Sergeant Cade's jaw was slack. His face had gone pale under his tan. All the arrogance, all the condescending swagger had been sandblasted away by that single impossible shot. He looked at the smoking Magnum in Samuel's hand, then at the old man's calm, steady eyes, and he felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He hadn't just been wrong. He had been blasphemous. How? Cade whispered, the word barely audible. How is that possible? Before Samuel could answer, the crunch of tires on gravel announced the arrival of a vehicle. A black command car pulled up behind the firing line, and a man in a crisp decorated uniform stepped out. He was a full bird colonel, his face weathered, but his posture radiating an unmistakable aura of command. He surveyed the scene, the stunned Rangers, the pale-faced sergeant, and Samuel Finch, who was calmly reloading his revolver. The colonel's eyes locked on Samuel, and a look of profound respect, almost reverence, softened his features. He walked past the saluting Rangers as if they weren't there, his entire focus on the old man. "Samuel," Colonel Davies said, his voice warm. "I was told you were coming today. I apologize for not being here to greet you personally." Samuel gave a slight nod. "It's all right, James. I was just getting reacquainted." Colonel Davies glanced at the Magnum, then at the frozen image on the monitor. A slow smile spread across his face. "Reacquainted, are you? It seems you've been giving these boys a lesson." He turned his gaze on Sergeant Cade, and the warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by ice. "Sergeant, report." Cade swallowed hard, snapping to attention. "Sir, we had a civilian on the range. I was questioning his authorization and his equipment, sir." "His equipment?" Colonel Davies repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He walked over to the bench and looked down at the massive revolver. He didn't touch it. He wouldn't have dared. "You mean this relic? This piece of junk?" Cade paled further. "Sir, you have any idea what you're looking at, Sergeant?" Davies cut him off, his voice rising with controlled fury. "You see a broken-down gun? I see the hand of God. That's what they called it. The only one ever made. Built to the personal specifications of the man holding it. That custom scope doesn't measure windage. It measures barometric pressure, humidity, and Coriolis effect. That gun in his hands is not a firearm. It is a ballistic miracle." He turned his steely gaze back to the young, arrogant sergeant. "And the man you see, an old-timer, a grandpa, I see the founder of the very unit you're so proud to be a part of. I see the man who wrote the book on long-range marksmanship. A book you probably glanced at in training and thought you knew better than. I see the phantom who held a mountain pass alone for 72 hours with nothing but that revolver and 10 rounds, saving an entire company from being overrun. An action so classified never earned him a medal. Only the undying gratitude of the few men who know the truth." The colonel stepped closer to Cade, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You were standing on a range that was built based on his designs. You were using tactics that were born from his blood and sacrifice. You mocked a living monument. You dismissed a legend. You have no idea the honor you were just given, standing in his presence, and you spat on it." The silence that followed was absolute. Every ranger stood frozen, the weight of the colonel's words crushing them. They looked at Samuel, truly seeing him for the first time. They saw the quiet dignity not as weakness, but as immense strength. They saw the gnarled hands not as old, but as instruments of impossible skill. They saw the clear, steady eyes, and understood they were looking at a man who had seen and done things they could only dream of in their worst nightmares. Sergeant Cad's entire world had been upended. His face crumpled, the arrogance replaced by a profound, gut-wrenching shame. He took a hesitant step towards Samuel, his body rigid. He executed the sharpest salute of his life. "Sir," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion, "I have no excuse. My conduct was unacceptable. I am deeply sorry for the disrespect I showed you." Samuel looked at the young broken man before him. He saw not an enemy, but a reflection of his own long-lost youth. The same fire, the same certainty, the same need to prove himself. He reached out a hand not to shake Cade's, but to gently push the salute down. "At ease," Sergeant Samuel said, his voice soft. "Pride is a heavy pack to carry. It's better to set it down before it breaks your back." He glanced at the Magnum, then back at Cade. "The gun is just steel and wood. The uniform is just cloth. They don't make the soldier. The heart does. The will does. Respect isn't about what you can see. It's about what you're willing to learn from those who have walked the path before you." He picked up the ejected shell casing, its brass still warm, and pressed it into Cad's palm. "Remember this, not the shot. Remember what you felt when you thought I was nothing. That feeling is a better teacher than any target." Cade looked down at the casing in his hand as if it were a holy relic. He nodded, unable to speak. In that moment, he learned more about being a soldier, about being a man, than in all his years of training. He had been humbled not by the impossible shot, but by the incredible grace of the man who made it. As Colonel Davies escorted Samuel toward his car, the old veteran paused and looked back at the stunned group of young rangers. "Keep your aim true," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "But keep your judgment truer." The rangers watched him go, silent and transformed. They stood on their multi-million-dollar range, surrounded by the most advanced weaponry in the world, and realized that true strength wasn't measured in technology or firepower. It was measured in quiet dignity, in a lifetime of unseen sacrifice, and in the steady hand of a master who had long ago learned there was nothing left to prove. The silence on the range was no longer one of shock, but of deep, profound, and everlasting reverence. Stories like this remind us that heroes don't always wear shining armor or announce their presence. They walk among us, quiet and unassuming, their greatness hidden behind wrinkles and worn-out jackets. They are the giants whose shoulders we stand on, and they ask for nothing in return but the simple respect they earned in ways we can barely imagine. So next time you see an old veteran, remember Samuel Finch. Don't judge the cover because you have no idea the incredible story that lies within. Thank you for watching, and if this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales of unsung heroes.